So today we're going to be talking about Ja Morant, and we're going to be talking about the whole situation with him and his coach Thomas Iselo, and what I think this means for the future of basketball and the future of the NBA. Because Thomas Iselo is one of the best basketball coaches in the world. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But he's also the wrong coach for what is the quote unquote NBA superstar, the old school superstar. You're larger than life. You have your signature shoe. You're bigger than the franchise. You're bigger than any coach. If you don't fit in with your teammate, the teammate's gone. This larger than life, you're stereotypical franchise player. I don't think he's the right coach for that. But also, when has that ever succeeded? And I understand you might be saying Shea this, Shea that. Shea's not. As good as Shea is, Shea's not your stereotypical ultra high ego guy. And by the way, to get to the point where the Ja Morant has been, especially with how he came up through Murray State to the second pick in the draft, you have to have the utmost confidence in yourself. But you have a coach who is very much I am the leader of this team. I am the coach. What I say goes. And to say that his system's not working, I'm not going to say it's an understatement because I don't think it is working. But I think you also have to take into account that if Ja Morant buys into their system, how much better would their system look? That's one of those argument points you always have to think about is how much better would this system look if Ja was buying in? When your best player, and by the way, it doesn't sound like Triple J is buying in either. They are still in the play-in spots in the West, which is exactly where they were last year. I know they have a worse record, but Ja Morant was pissed at Taylor Jenkins, who's the best coach in Grizzlies history, arguably. Either him or Lionel Hollins. Was it Lionel Hollins in 2013? Either way, probably the best coach in their history. He had a problem because he took away the pick and roll. And they bring in let's be completely honest, one of the best coaches in the world, one of the best young coaches in the world. And you bring him in, and he's pissed off again because of the minute rotations. And the reasoning why Ja's pissed, if you guys know anything about basketball, not realistically in the NBA, and I genuinely think even in college basketball, you need you can't really get away with doing what these NBA superstars do. And by the way, this is not an American versus overseas thing, because this dude would hate Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic might be the worst player in the NBA for this. This isn't a thing. It's a philosophy thing. And it's one of those things where it's some people say, talking about college coaches not translating. But at the same time, if we look at the real good teams, at the real good systems and the real good teams, especially the teams that have excelled out of small markets, we look at your zero ego superstar in Giannis. LeBron's just LeBron. OKC put together an unbelievable core. Who's their coach? Mike D'Antoni. Rotates in everybody. A super basketball mind. And then, heck, if you look at those Hawks teams with Coach Bud, if you look at some of the Spurs teams under Pop, where they didn't have that, especially late in Pop era, not even late in Pop era, late in the Duncan era, they didn't have that superstar necessarily. Their best player was Tony Parker in 2014. And this is a post-prime Tony Parker was their best player. And they all just kind of bought into their system. If you look at the Miami Heat culture, there's a reason why the Miami Heat always overperform, are always better than the sum of their parts. And that's what happens when you have a good coach with a system and a team that buys in. When you don't buy in, it becomes, can we out-talent teams? Are our stars better? And unpopular opinion, Jaren Jackson Jr. as a duo, as your quote-unquote superstar duo, are one of the weaker, genuinely some of the one of the weaker duos in the league as a best two. Maybe the 16th best. But then you look at the players that are buying into his system, like a Cedric Howard, and the ease of shots he's getting, the shots that realistically Ja should be getting, but Ja wants to zag. So Ja wants to go away from it. And the reason is with his system is everyone plays as hard as they can. You don't take any plays off. You play till you get tired, and then we'll take you off and put you back in. Whereas conventional not even conventional NBA thinking is superstars are allowed to take possessions off on the defensive end because they can go out on the offensive end and cook, and they're allowed to take possessions off. You're allowed to shoot bad shots because, that's getting in rhythm. And realistically, Iselo his whole philosophy is just basically the getting in rhythm thing is bullshit. Play hard, get your looks, you can score. Like in Europe, he's one of the best. Like he was a fucking maverick prodigy coach, in Europe. Like what he was able to do is scary. Like what he was able to do as a coach with when he was coaching Bonn and when he was coaching Paris. Like he was able to have these teams that people didn't necessarily think were the greatest teams in the world. But he was able to drastically overperform with them. Like, he led Paris Basket to 25 games unbeaten. And I get it, Paris Basket's a big team, but that's still a lot. That's still a lot of games. And this is a real turning point now with, I think, the WNBA, or sorry, not the WNBA, the NBA, is that do you zig and go back to conventional wisdom? Do you build around your star no matter what, who is declining as a player? Who's declining, but he is your brand. He's what puts butts in seats. Or do you take a risk on a system, which as a small market team gives you a chance? Maybe not this year, maybe in 2 years when players learn the system and you sign a bunch of players for the system. And if any superstars have too much egos to play the system, you get rid of them. Do you bet on the potential superstar coach, or do you bet on the declining superstar? And the assumption is you are going to bet on the declining superstar because the NBA is a business more than as much as it's a basketball league. Ja Morant puts butts in seats. And I think a lot of teams, this is one of those funny things where it's like teams are trying to, are monitoring the situation with Ja Morant. I think teams need to be monitoring this entire situation. Because if you are one of those tanking teams, I'm monitoring the situation with Thomas Iselo. Like, I'm monitoring his situation because I think if you give him to a young team who are coming into the league, give him input on who you guys are going to bring in, who you guys are drafting, getting the right pieces there, the right personalities there, I think he can be one of the best coaches in the league. But you got to put the right pieces around him, and Ja's not that. And I don't know. I think the Memphis Grizzlies might choose to keep Ja over him. But if you're looking at some of these tanking teams, like if you look at the teams, like some of the good teams, genuinely the good teams coming off tanks, like you're looking at the Jazz, who, by the way, like I understand the Jazz are tanking, like, but there's a big but here when it comes to the Utah Jazz. They're tanking right now, but they've looked better. Like, they don't have the roster to compete. But they have, at times, looked better. And they've hired a developmental coach. They got rid of Quinn Snyder a few years ago. If you look at OKC, they've kept their developmental coach the whole way. And that's just one of those things where it takes a very different coach to be a Phil Jackson Zen master, get a bunch of superstars working together, which is not Thomas Iselo. Like, he is absolutely not the coach for the flashy super team. But what he will be able to do as a coach is he's going to be, if you can bring his system and get him with the right players, with NBA players, with the system he has, he is going to be one of those coaches that takes teams that you expect to win 25 games and wins 45 games with them. A team that expects to win 30 games maybe goes and wins 55 and gets to a conference semis. And like, for people being like, oh, the goal of the NBA is to win a championship. How many NBA coaches do you think are championship coaches? 3? Like, Spo, Who are championship level coaches in the NBA? Spo is. Again, Udoka is basically a defensive version of Iselo, except he commands more respect because he was an NBA player. They're basically similar. They're really similar. But if you give Udoka a team of fucking high ego players that don't work hard, he'll just tell them all to leave. He just has the power to do that because of what he did with Boston. I don't know how great a coach Mazzulla is. I think he just inherited a championship winning team. Spo's a championship level coach that can like win a championship without just inheriting a team. I don't even know. Mike Dionel, maybe. And I don't think he's going to win a championship. Just like I'm not sure Udoka ever wins a championship. But I think he could have an Udoka type impact on a team. Like he can make a team play better than the sum of their parts, which is, again, is that not kind of the point of being a coach at the same time? But at the same time, I think they're going to get rid of him because of Ja Morant. And I think Ja Morant the Grizzlies are going to let Ja Morant run out this contract. They're going to give him another max contract as he regresses to being a terrible player. And then they're going to be gradually getting worse and worse and worse as Ja Morant is going to be one of the worst contracts in the NBA. Like, we've seen the Ja Morant story too many times. We know how the Ja Morant story ends. But what we don't know is how the Thomas Iselo story ends. Actually, no, we do know how it ends. He's going to get fired. He's going to go coach back in Europe, and he's going to be a legend over there. We know how his story ends too, and we know how the Memphis Grizzlies story ends. Ja Morant on lists of Ja Morant on the list of the worst contracts in the league. Years and years and years of Grizzlies are trying to trade Ja Morant. Should the Grizzlies trade Ja Morant? To can the Grizzlies trade Ja Morant? To will the Grizzlies buy out Ja Morant? Like, we know how the Ja Morant story ends. And the unfortunate thing is that we also know how the Thomas Isalo story ends. We know how the story ends, but it's unfortunate because if you just move on from Ja, we could potentially see a completely different and more positive story in Memphis. And Isalo could flame out in Memphis. He could. He genuinely could. But we also know at the same time Ja will flame out in Memphis. Isalo might flame out in Memphis. We know for a fact Ja's going to flame out in Memphis. Because we've seen this story way too many times. And the unfortunate thing about all this is that we know in this scenario, it takes a lot of balls to go coach over superstar, especially when it's a rookie coach. And I don't think an organization like the Memphis Grizzlies have the luxury of going coach over superstar when they need to put butts in seats. I'm going to be honest.